thank you for this opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's a very, very important conversation that we all are having with regard to climate change, because as people say, there is no planet B. We only have one planet, and that's Earth. Of course, there are several planets. We're still discovering more and more planets in our solar system. But reality is that Earth is our only planet where we all live, and there's no science that can actually help us multiply this Earth, both in terms of number of Earths that we have or the entire land mass of Earth in a sense. So it's very, very important. It's very, very critical for all of us to understand, accept, acknowledge, and act towards this fact that there is only one planet and there's no planet B. It's very important that we're having this conversation around climate change. One thing that has actually happened in last, several years, in last few years, I would say, that it's not something which is a myth. We have actually spent almost a decade and a half or 2 decades denying the fact that there is climate change. What we've seen just in this last 1 year is effective evidence to prove that there is climate change, which is not far and distant, both in terms of geography or time, both in terms of geography or future, but it is actually happening in our own neighborhood. What has happened in Uttarakhand, what is happening in Chennai, or happened in Kerala, or in Darjeeling, in several parts of India, in last just couple of weeks, that we've seen enough evidence that climate change is real, climate change is alarming, climate change is actually something which takes our lives away, takes our livelihood away, and is the real threat and the biggest threat that we actually are facing. This morning, Delhi's air quality in several parts of Delhi, it's actually 490. Now, of course, one would say that how is climate change linked to air pollution? Of course, climate change is linked to air pollution. Of course, climate change is linked to water pollution. Of course, climate change is linked to our missing birds and bees and frogs and mosquitoes and everything else, because we all live in an interconnected world. And therefore, the first thing that we need to all understand, that when we talk about climate change, when we talk about global warming, when we talk about sustainability, all of this is one web, and we are just a tiny little player in that web. And unfortunately, this tiny little participant called human being in this larger web of sustainability or larger web of this planet is the most arrogant being. So we as human beings are the most arrogant and most damaging species on this planet that has actually brought our entire planet to a standstill, or to this extreme danger of extinction. Extinction, when I call extinction, of course, right now we're only talking about a few species that are going to extinct. But reality is that if we keep business as usual, if we keep doing what we're doing right now, we will extinct too. We will also disappear, vanish from this planet. Of course, we might think that it's only one forest gone at a time, or one river polluted at a time, or one city that is actually getting a toxic air. But no, this clearly means that the threat is on us and on our future generations. Now, when we talk about climate change, we've just had Glasgow summit. As I said, that there are historical polluters. There are people who, and people in the sense countries and also individuals that are the biggest polluters of our world. 7 richest countries of this planet actually contribute to more than 50% of the global load of carbon in the sense. These are the richest countries that have actually industrialized. These are the countries that actually so-called show the world a way of how to develop. But unfortunately, that model of development, of growth, prosperity, of really aspiration is what has actually damaged our planet. When I say countries, same thing applies for people as well. As in Oxfam talks about the fact that some of the richest people of our planet have the highest footprint. As in, if you look at perhaps 10% of the richest people, or 10% of the population of our world, which is extremely rich, contribute to 50% of global warming. So we need to understand this entire conversation of global warming from the lens of equity and justice, that richest countries of the world are the most polluters and richest individuals of our world are the biggest emitters. And unfortunately, in that breath, when we talk about richest people and richest nations, unfortunately, it's the educated people, people like you and I, people who actually speak English, people like you and I who eat pizza, people like you and I who buy branded clothes, people like you and I who want to go on a holiday. We are the ones who are the largest polluters, who are the largest emitters, who are the largest contributors to global warming on this planet. Now, one thing is to establish climate change, that it's a reality. The other is also to establish accountability. And I think what has happened in Glasgow, or what has actually happened in several of the last world summits on climate change, is that we have actually defined where the fault lies. Where is the cause of pollution, or where is the cause of our global warming? I think what we require right now is accurate, efficient, timely action by these stakeholders. I think the world was actually committed $100 billion to fix some of these crimes of the past. I would call it, as when you actually pollute a planet and make children and future generations suffer, that's a crime. It's not just a byproduct of development. It's actually the main product of development, which everyone is aware of. And when you are aware of the byproduct, which is so toxic, which is so polluting, which is so lethal, then you're actually participating in that crime knowingly, and you have to be held accountable. So it's very, very important for all of us to acknowledge that it's not a mistake. It's a thing that we're doing very, very knowingly. We've actually made our life's ambitions, or a lifestyle ambition, or aspiration of a better lifestyle more important than our right to life. Indeed, it is important to move. Indeed, it is important to move from point A to point B. But imagine, because you want to move from point A to point B in a fancy car and not take a public transport, the impact of that is that there are millions and millions of children in our country who are actually getting born with stunted, lung, or have some form of breathing ailment or the other. Lancet report talks about how 1.5 million people die in our country every year because of air pollution. We just had a report from Lung Care Foundation just 2.5 months ago that talks about how every third child born in Delhi or living in Delhi is prone to asthma. So when we have those figures in front of us, when we have that data and science in front of us, it is very, very important for all of us to take corrective measure. Corrective measure, both individually, as an individual, what can I do? How can I change my life? And collectively, as a society and as government, how do we actually change the way things are actually moving in our surrounding? Look at the example of Surat. Surat had the plague. And what happened? Since then, we haven't really seen or heard of plague from Surat, because everyone in that little city, in that little town, decided that we cannot repeat this. We can't lose our life. We need to take responsibility. And this is not just the government that actually said that we need to be a cleaner city. It was also individuals. So when you say, what is in it for me to really fix the climate, or fix our air, or fix our water? Our interest is our own health, our own well-being, our mortality and morbidity. Everything is linked to a better city, better society, better country, better planet. Similarly, similar to Surat, we've actually seen there are several stories of change coming from different parts of the country where citizens, as I said, Delhi's AQI this morning is 490, and you can hear me cough as well. Several individuals and several communities in different parts of our country are actually taking those small measures, be it in the space of agriculture, be it in the space of producing sustainable solutions. I think it's very, very important for each one of us to think of a solution, not when there is a TED talk or there's a camera in front of you, when you have to participate in an essay competition talking about how to save a planet. It is not an essay, it's not an academic conversation. It is a conversation that you need to have with yourself when nobody's watching you, and think of solutions that you can actually imagine that you need to bring out in your own life, in your own family's life, in your own society's life, that actually influences that carbon, influences your neighborhood. One is to really save Himalayas. It is important to have a cleaner Himalayas or cleaner North Pole. But more important than having a cleaner Himalaya or a cleaner North Pole or a cleaner Ganga is to look at behind your boundary wall of your own house. In your own neighborhood, how do you manage your waste is more critical or most critical than actually thinking of changing the world. Changing the world actually happens at the level of I, at the level of micro level, at the level of your own individual things that you can actually influence. So what I do in this particular room is more important than what a fancy paper or a fancy research document that I actually produce, or a great film that I make on disappearing turtles of the ocean, or for that matter, a plastic, a mountain of plastic that is actually there in the Himalayas. So my call to most citizens always has been that look at a solution which is local. Look at a solution that you can think of doing when nobody is watching you and you are accountable, because climate change affects each one of us and affects our children and elderly the most. Right now, we need to really look at sustainability, sustainable world, sustainable solution, not just from a fad lens point of view. We have every evidence. As I said, Kerala is getting flooded. Chennai is getting flooded. There are cloud bursts happening in different parts of our country. There's forest fire everywhere. Now, we cannot just make this normal. We can't say it's just an accident. No, if it is happening again and again, if there's a pattern, there is something like this happening every year. We need to link this to climate change and not treat this as a one-off event. There is solution. There is solution to energy. We all need to understand that 30% of air pollution in Delhi is because of private vehicles. Now, we as a society really need to look at how do we move from individual mobility to public mobility. The biggest other contributor is construction and demolition, and the dust that actually comes from construction and demolition activities and roadside dust. We always think like, the air comes from an air conditioner or from a fan. No, our air, our clean air, our cooler air comes from our trees. We need to understand the importance of a tree at a time. We need to understand the importance of saving that water that we flush, thinking, oh, well, it is okay to flush that water. Please understand, as I said, equity and justice. Each time you flush extra because you don't want your bathroom to stink, that is at the cost of thousands and thousands, or I would say millions and millions of people, millions and millions of fellow Indians who don't have access to water. So when we talk about a resource, it is not just about wastage. It is not just about love for our planet. It is also, we need to understand that it is at the cost of the poorest of the poor. We need to save our planet because climate change affects poorest of the poor the most. We've seen agriculture crisis. We've actually seen the farm protest last 1 year. Our farming institutions or our agriculture sector is the most vulnerable. You might think it's drizzling outside and such a lovely weather to actually venture out with your friends, but that untimely rain means that that particular farmer loses their entire harvest or their entire crop that they've been actually in a way nurturing for several months. So those untimely rain, untimely heat, untimely storm, untimely cloudburst, all of that affects poorest of the poor people a lot. And therefore, climate change is not just about saving planet. It is not just a romantic idea of having a blue sky and blue river, but it is about access to life, right to life, and right to life, not just for the rich and the privileged, but for the poorest and the poorest and the poorest of millions of people who are the most vulnerable when it comes to climate change. For them, an extra rain means they lose their homes. An extra rain means they lose their crop. an extra rain means they're actually forced to either migrate or commit suicide. So climate change is about today. We have missed the bus. We have actually, are too late already. Unless and until we wake up today and think that it is an emergency, it is not just a change, it is climate emergency. Unless and until we are able to, unless and until we have the wisdom to think and connect those dots, we will not be able to survive. We will not be able to do justice to our future generations. Hope all of us in this new year think of this as an alarm bell. It is not just yet another conference or yet another TED talk on climate change. Climate change is real. Climate change is knocking. Climate change needs to be addressed ASAP. Thank you.